Identity governance. It isn't the most sexiest topic, and whenever I talk about the topic, I try and tell people don't forget about the fact that it's really important. Even more so, it could be one of the cornerstones of security, identity security, or your overall security strategy. My name is Michael Van Horenbeek. I'm your host, and this is the Trust Zone podcast. Today I'm joined by Jan. Jan is a good friend and Microsoft MVP, has been very active in the communities around Entra, but I'll let him do most of the talking today. Hello, Jan. Welcome.
Hello, Michael. Thanks for having me as a guest on your podcast. Looking forward to this chat, really.
It is really my pleasure, right? The way this podcast came to be, like we were at the Cloud Identity Summit, we had the chat about governance, and I was like, I need to get you on my podcast. So thanks for joining me today. For the people who don't know who you are, which I highly doubt, could you maybe do a little introduction of yourself?
I will do that. So my name is Jan Vidar Elven. I'm from Norway. So as you said in the beginning, I've been Microsoft MVP for quite a while now. All the way I've been focusing on what used to be Azure AD. Now it's Entra ID and Identity and Access. That's my corner where I feel really at home discussing. I also work across the Microsoft stack. I work with Microsoft Azure infrastructure as code, DevOps, a lot of things. So I cannot leave my hands out of anything that's exciting. And of course, a little bit a sprinkle of AI these days. So yeah, that's me. I work for a company called Evidi. So I'm a consultant. We are a Microsoft partner. So that puts me in a position where I can work with my specialties towards customers and organizations. So that's the practical knowledge as well, in addition to the community work. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's what we need. Real world experts sharing some of their knowledge or thoughts and ideas. So, today, obviously, we're going to talk about Entra ID governance or identity governance in general. But why is that a topic to you, or why is that a topic that matters to you? You've been talking about it on conferences for a while now.
Yeah, I have. So going back to the simplest of definitions of IAM, right? It's about having the right access to the right persons or services at the right time. So to be able to do that, you either have to have some people that are really super diligent and have full control of everything in their environment, so they know exactly what access to give to who at any given time. But that's too hard a challenge today with all the services we have in the cloud and on-prem and the hybrid and yeah, there's challenges around any corner, right? So we need some tools, we need some processes, we need some frameworks, we need some automations to be able to live up to that promise to give every identity access to the right resources at the right time and at the right level. So we can start with that, and that's why I find this so interesting, because it's so hard, but it sometimes also can be quite simple. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, right? I think that lots of organizations, consultants, companies kind of tend to overcomplicate identity governance. I mean, it is a very broad topic, right? It touches on a lot of things. So we don't have to underestimate it either, but there's lots of things that you can do, to get started easily. But before we get into the weeds of, what to look at, what Microsoft Entra ID governance is and how we could help, what if, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges or risks even that organizations face if they don't do identity governance?
Well, the biggest risk is on the other side of that definition, right? Because if you lose control, If you have identities that can access something that they shouldn't have, or they might still have that access even when they leave the organization. On the other side, you can have a loss of productivity because you're keeping it too tight and people are not getting access to what they need to do their job. So it's always a balancing act. So you can lose productivity that costs money. You can lose your data in worst case. That will also cost the organization money and perception. So those are the things that I think is most important to get correct in line to keep that governing of the access tight to the right people at the right time. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, it seems fairly simple, right? You have to control who has access where and when, or for how long, the different Ws, as I like to call them.
Yeah.
But why do you think it's still often overlooked? At least that's my experience when I talk to customers. Like, they do identity security stuff and they do EDR and they do all the defender things. But when it comes to governing or governance in general and governance of identities, then typically there isn't much out there. Maybe the big companies do, but the smaller ones typically don't have anything. And why is that, you think?
Yeah. So if we focus on what the governing can give you, right? There's some different exciting tools in the Entra platform, which have found the development in the recent year very interesting. So we can help you with the inbound provisioning first and foremost. That will help you having the user accounts ready on the first day of work. You can even pre-provision and they can do follow-ups after the first day. So giving that access at the right time, help them with onboarding their devices, mobile phones, computers, and so on. It will quickly get them up to speed with access that they need. On the other hand, you can also include that kind of thinking into how should I organize my directory, because over time you have a lot of type of identities. So I typically often start with discussing with my customers, what are your identity personas? Everyone are end users, right? And they maybe have some admin accounts or privilege accounts. But what are other types of personas, like external contractors or guests or service principals and service accounts and so on and so on. So these are often the starting points for getting a good discussion in how governance can help.
Okay. Yep, that totally makes sense. So, I mean, we have the access sprawl, or not knowing who has access where,
Yeah.
the management thereof, or the life cycle that is a challenge. Um, uh, like, who needs access where, like the personas you mentioned. So when we combine these different challenges, risks, name it, and then compare it to to the Microsoft Entra ID governance capabilities. Could you maybe kind of map the different capabilities or the features that exist and how they solve some of these problems?
Yeah, I can do that. So first of all, let's start with privilege identity management, which should be known by many, and even also from time to time a little bit source of frustration. I don't think it's the capabilities in the service itself more directly, but how you do it and how effective it is. But of course, it's delivered on one of the core zero trust principles, like that is least privilege. So one of the access discussions we often have is that every access should be controlled in some way, like least privilege. What does that mean? Does that mean that you have to access and elevate yourself every day? For some types of access, that could be important to do. But um, other scenarios include also have a time restriction on it, so that you don't forget that you give that role or that access for one time and then they have it forever. Like so, so often these kind of access scenarios is dependent on I need something for a period of time. So then we can really use that privileged identity management feature effectively. And so that's something that's been there for a while. And we also have the entitlement management solution, where we can build catalogs and access packages. And the access packages can group resources like groups, Microsoft 365 groups and security groups, roles, applications, and SharePoint sites, and you can build effective packages that users can either be automatically assigned, or you can let them request them on access portal, or you can let managers do that, or a combination of that. So then you can kind of build your service catalog and expose your services and let users more effectively have that. So regarding the access in itself, we also mentioned that we need to have some way to have control and overview of which kind of access people have. And then we have the access review feature that will help you either let group owners or the users themselves tell if, do I still need this access? And you can say yes or no. And if they still need it, they can request for another period, or if not, they are automatically removed. And this is also extra interesting when you include guests, because then you can also clean up guests automatically if they are not responding to I need to be a guest still, for example. So there's a lot of exciting things. And the last little thing in entitlement management and identity governance I want to mention is the terms of use. So this is something that could be of a little bit underuse in my experience, especially in external scenarios, letting your guest know what you know about them and how they can exit your organization and where they can contact if they have some issues. That's a great user scenario for terms of use. And now we are seeing more and more scenarios for using terms of use internally as well. Often end users and employees, they kind of sign off in some HR system or something. But if you are giving a user a privilege account, for example, it's a great way to have some guiding principles and some information about terms of use for using your privilege access. Example. So these are some of the scenarios where you can really use the main features in governance.
Okay. So from a terms of use perspective, would you then consider prompting people every time they log onto a specific resource, like through an AVD or anything of the sorts? Or is it more I'll show you once and then I'll just assume that you've accepted and that you remember?
Yeah. So basically, it's the latter one. You will present it at a given time, and when they accept, they are not asked the same question every day. You have the ability to set that they have to kind of agree to that terms of use every year, for example. Or if you make a new version, you can have them to re-agree. So you have some tools there, but it's not for everyday use. No, that's not needed. And often people don't are aware of that. But if you have a terms of use, you can, as an end user, if you are a guest in a lot of organization, you can go in and see your other organizations, and you actually access that terms of use agreement at any time if you want to. So even though you are asked only one time, you can always go back and look into what did I say yes
Agree
to at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very valid point, right? I'm pretty sure if there's one takeaway from today, it's hey, if you do accept the terms of use, know that you can always get to that very easily, but very little people know, or very few, sorry, people know that you can actually get to them afterwards, and that you kind of know again what you've agreed and signed up for. So I think that's really a good one. And then I think there's one more left, and it's the lifecycle workflows, obviously.
Yeah. I left the best for last. So yeah. So lifecycle workflow is a game changer for many organizations. If you really look into the capabilities there, and it will grow, that is really, really exciting. So lifecycle workflows will support your joiner, mover, leaver scenarios, right? So joiner, mover, leaver, for those that haven't heard it, that's very quick. Joiner is a new employee. Leaver is leaving your organization, and mover is somebody that changes role, or in some respect need another kind of access requirement in your organization. So that means that you can automatically trigger workflows based on the employee start date. Or we typically build a timeline when we design this, like day 0 is the day you start, right? but you can have T minus 14. That's the 14 days before you begin. You can T minus 30. That's 30 days before you begin. So most organizations need to prepare something like 30 days before. Let's say you need to add the users to an enterprise application, an ERP system or payroll system or something, because you need to prepare something in that system to make them able to have their salary and access into project or production planning systems or so on. So typically that starts before the user ends up on the first day of work. And 14 days before, you maybe add some licenses to the user so that they have a calendar. The manager and their team can start planning their calendar and invite them to meetings and onboarding sessions and so on. So that will also be something that you can prepare and make ready 14 days before or 7 days or whatever. And the day of work, the day you start, you will typically onboard the user. You can send out a temporary access pass via the join workflow. So let the users easily onboard their devices on the first day of work, add them to some teams and send some welcome messages and everything. And you can even extend that to like T plus 40 or T plus 30. You add the users because you have a defined process of how you are onboarding your employees, right? So this is something that is very, very valuable to start with using that joiner scenarios. And of course, the lever is based on employee leave date. So you can have triggers automatically disable user 30 days after. You can delete it maybe, or clean up some access requirements and so on. So yeah, and the mover, let's discuss that a little bit later, but I have some ideas there as well. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think of the three scenarios, movers are the hardest to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, so I agree that I love the templates that Microsoft provided in terms of making them simple of, onboarding the scenarios that you described, like, hey, you want to maybe add them to groups X amount of days before they actually start and then issue a tab to the manager the day of the start so that, the account is automatically enabled. So it remains in a disabled state. So things that IT would typically, do on a Monday morning when someone starts, go enable the account, reset the password, share the password. It's kind of like automated. And the same thing goes for when someone leaves the organization. Like we use the templates. We've modified them a little bit so that people, a week before they leave the organization, they get an email on how to prepare for the last week, for the last day, what they need to do from a paperwork perspective. And then on the last day of work, their accounts at the end of the day, they're automatically disabled. Messages are sent to people. The out of office is configured automatically. Things that, are easily forgotten. And it's a one-time effort. So I agree. But it does save a lot of time, especially if you've got a lot of churn. Like, luckily for us, it's been, fairly okay. But the larger organizations, this could be a huge time saver. And it's fairly simple to set up. But I did want to add one more thing that not maybe, but I'm sure you've noticed. But what I hate is the fact that you cannot set in the GUI the employee leave date. Like, for the love of God, I don't know why they've taken or where they haven't put in that capability yet.
Yeah, so I have some thoughts about that, and of course you're right. You cannot set the employee leave date. It's actually not visible in the portal at all,
Mm-hmm.
and you also need a special graph permission, lifecycle workflow. Yeah, I forgot the details, but there's a specific role in graph that you need to be able to see it in the Graph Explorer or via Graph PowerShell or something. Of course, leave date are sensitive information, right? You don't want people that are general directory readers or something in the organization to be able to see, hey, my colleague is leaving next month. My manager is leaving. What's happening? So that's the reasoning why. But yeah, if you we should probably have a Entra role like Lifecycle that would expose that information also in the portal, like for those people that should know. But yeah, there are ways to get it, but yeah, it's hidden. It's hidden. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, when you go talk to customers that may maybe not have that technical expertise, and you tell them, you know what, we're going to automate everything. It's going to be super easy. But oh, by the way, if you want to trigger this flow, here's a script that you have to use to kind of set the date. And then they look at you and be like, really?
Yeah.
It's a little bit unfortunate, but kind of brings me before we dive into the mover process, right? So we've had the different features, but a question I get asked quite often is like, well, privileged identity management is well understood. I don't think that we have to kind of keep beating that same nail, or maybe we have to. But how does that all fit together? Like, can you come up with a few, let's say, use cases where you say, hey, in this scenario, this is where we use this. This is how the access reviews kind of came into play, or the entitlement management bits and pieces, in a workflow to make it a little bit more tangible for the listeners?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So breaking it down, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So well, there's some different viewpoints on this. Let's if we have a good design or good thinking, and an established process for handling the different identity personas, then you can say that okay, if you are end user, and you are belonging to a certain part of the organization, like IT operations or platform operations team or something, then we can automate the creation of an extra privileged account for those kind of users. So let's say that you have a lifecycle workflow, you have a joiner, a new user is going to be my colleague at the IT operation and security team. We can automate the processing of the end user itself, but likewise we can also via the lifecycle workflow we can call something called what I call the magic wand. That's the custom extensions that brings up a logic app, and with the logic app you can call basically any API you want, in addition to the connectors and the possibilities in the logic app. So there you can kind of, let's say that you create a privilege account, you connect it to the end user using sponsor attributes or security attributes. There are different great community solutions how you can do this. You mentioned Thomas, right? He has created a good solution for that. So you can basically automate all that stuff. So the end user is not getting on their own work user ready on the first day of work, but they also have their privilege access because you have automated and created a good solution for that. The other way to go is to use an access package where people can request an admin privilege, and you can have something to someone that approves that process, and you can automate that as well and using the same kind of solution. So this is something you can do for specific set of users as an offer, or something that's automated because you are based in the organization where you should have a privileged user anyway. So I don't know if that answers some of your question, but that's kind of one simple scenario you can look into.
No, I think that's a perfect example, right, of how you can combine certain things. And
Mm.
I almost forgot about the extensibility, right? I
Yeah.
mean, not really forget, but it's the fact that you can leverage Power Apps, Jesus, Logic Apps, through those custom extensions basically means that the sky's the limit. And I love the fact that you called it a magic wand. I'm going to steal that one from you,
Yeah. That's
because it basically allows you to touch pretty much anything. So I'll throw you that curveball. You've got that magic wand, but how does that solve the mover process challenges that you have?
Yeah. And this is something we started discussing in Dortmund, right, a
Uh-huh.
few weeks back, because I asked you a specific question, and this is something that is very interesting to discuss, because we are going along those same lines when we discuss with customers, and also internally at my company. We need to have a good process to do the mover, because um, there's a lot of things that needs to be done when, what if a user is not only if the user is new, but also if they change the job, right? Because they are getting new accesses, but they should also remove some of their old ones, because they cannot stack them forever. Like if they're moving the organization and you have been employed for 20 years and you can basically do everything because you had different roles, that's not the correct way to do it. But in the end, it's that many organizations are there, right? You never lose a group, you just add one. So So the mover lifecycle workflow, going back to the Entra, that they have two triggers on that: a group change or an attribute change. And the attributes are very interesting, and that was something that I found also very interesting when you talked about this stuff in Dortmund, because having management of the attributes is very, very important to have a good structure and a strategy of how are you using your attributes. Either if you're synchronizing from an HR system or if you have another source, but you have some kind of management of those attributes and understanding of what to use when. And I think many organizations are quite good there. They are not completely at home. And I see this almost everywhere, with a few exceptions. But what I tend to do is that I organize the attributes in like identifier attributes, like your employee ID, for example. You can get that from your HR system or your user principal name in some cases, which all would also be unique. But and then you have your personal attributes, your name, and so on. You have some contact information, but then you can move to the what is your job role? Is it in your department, or is it that you are in a specific company? So you have these attributes in Entra, like your company name, department. You can also use something called division and cost center. That's part of a sub object called employee org data. And you can also use some office location and so on. So let's say that a combination of these is something that defines your role in your organization. And you can, some organization also use like extension attributes and so on. So this is something you need to sit down and really look at. What attributes are going to define my role? And when do I change a role from this role to another? Is it just changing a department? It could be that in some cases, but other cases it's more that you change your manager, maybe your location, or a combination of that. So what I from my wish list from for Entra ID Governance, it would be for me to have the ability to build roles, job roles, based on attributes and have that kind of as an artifact or something.
Mm.
Because you can create that logic yourself now, but it's a little bit harder because the mover lifecycle workflows, it will kick on every attribute change and not a combination of them. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I find it's really that's probably the toughest nut to crack because this is the one where your organization structure or your culture or how you do stuff in your organization really impacts what you can automate or how you can automate things.
Yeah.
Let's say that you are a huge company and you have got well-defined job roles, then it should be fairly easy to define what access or what privileges a certain role has. And, if someone moves from role A to role B, then obviously, take away all the accesses they have in role A and then you give them role B. But what I find is that more and more organizations have trouble defining what a job role is. They kind of evolve from well-defined roles to having mandates where despite of the title you may have or the department you work in, you have certain responsibilities, right? These mandates that tell you, okay, so Jan is responsible for A, B, and C, and Jan may move to a different department, but still has a certain mandate in another part. So you kind of accrue certain access rights. I'm not going to call them birthrights, but because those are very different. But you accrue certain access rights, and you lose some of them, but not all of them when you change roles. Which is why I find the workflows and the mover processes, at the end of the day, for some organizations, the best thing, but for other organizations, I'd rather move towards the access packages with access reviews, where you grant someone a certain right, you give it for 3-6 months, and as long as they have that right or that mandate or that role within the organization, they keep having access to that access package. But as soon as that they move roles, they move within the organization, X amount of time later, that access to that access package and thus the resources connected to it kind of fade away upon the next access review, I'd say.
Yeah, great point. And that's certainly one way to get started with the mover lifecycle workflow, because if you can, like, say you have changed in the department, you can create a trigger on that will notify the manager, you might need to do a custom extension, use that magic wand to be able to really get that level of customization. But then you can notify the manager, or maybe you can call the Microsoft Graph API and automatically kick an access review, for example. So you can do stuff like that. It's hard from an Entra ID admin's perspective to automate everything, because you are not the one that knows everything on every system. In some cases, you need to have the different owners of the applications involved as well, and
Yeah.
that's also something also that I think is important to discuss, because I've seen scenarios where, okay, if you are going to have hundreds of logic apps that tap into different systems and do some custom optimizations, you have a lot of maintenance on your hand. So you need to keep it simple, and you can use the custom extensions to maybe have some notification system. We've been looking into using service bus and topics, and let end users, not end users, but application responsible persons tap into and subscribe to changes instead, for example. So you can
Oh,
flip the
okay.
coin a little bit. So there are different ways to access this, but this is the hardest part. If you're not using Lifecycle Workflows today, start with a joiner and lever and get control on that, and then you will see all the possibilities.
I agree. Right. It's rather to do something than to get caught up in the we can't do everything, so we're not going to do anything at all. And I also wholeheartedly agree with you that IT cannot keep doing everything. Like over the past 25 years that I've been active, I've seen the workload of a generic IT profile just grow and grow and grow. We used to just do the servers and make sure everything's up and running and did the end user support. Now we manage clouds and applications and security and automations. And, it's just too much for an IT department to keep managing. Yet I still see organizations where changes to permissions or to roles, it's a ticket for IT, and IT goes into systems and click ops wise makes changes. So I think that a large part of identity governance is also a push left, where we have to educate the business that they are responsible for what they need access to. And I think it's through Entra ID governance capabilities and other IGA tools that we can finally make that easier on them rather than make it too complex. So with that, and as we are nearing towards that 40-minute mark here, there's two more things that I wanted to ask you, right? So first of all, I've briefly mentioned other IGA tools. So what would be some of the ones that you see out there that are directly competing, but also often used as alternatives to Entra ID governance?
Yeah, so I have actually a little bit limited experience in at least practical hands-on knowledge about that. So like Ping, for example, I know that it's in the market, but and very comparable features. But I see more and more that if you are already good invested, and if you don't have any systems like this before, we have some customers that use Omada in combination, for example. We also have people that build kind of their own stuff for automating, often based on local AD. So we're trying to close the bridge a little bit, see what can we have of quick values. But yeah, so my main focus is on the Microsoft solutions. So
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think
yeah.
Very large organizations may often have a third party
Yeah.
IGA solution. You mentioned it, Omada, there's SailPoint and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think the sweet spot for the EID governance is in these small, medium enterprises. I mean, some large corporates as well, but they probably lack a few features that these fully fledged solutions that are way more expensive as well kind of offer. So what's kind of the sweet spot that you see with your customers, your experiences in size of companies that are actively benefiting from EID governance?
As long as you reach into the hundreds, I see that from that starting point, you can start to really use some of the governance features. There's a step up for some organizations in terms of licenses, but you can do a lot of things in governance also before you do that step up. Lifecycle workflows, the joiner mover leaver scenario, then you need to have that step up. But you can do something with the access packages. You can do something with the ID inbound provisioning, for example. So this is generally where we start, and then we try to see the value in using those governance features. And as long as you have more users than you can handle,
I've got 5, so yeah.
by ClickUps, there's some value in this, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Like we're 35 in our company, and I see the value for even the limited work you would otherwise expect. So I think, anything over, I love how you put that, more than you can handle, and whatever that threshold is, it's probably low enough to get started and do stuff. And yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of salesy, and I really don't mean it that way, but I'm a big fan of the Entra suite. Like I'm not a big fan of selling and add-ons and add-ons upon add-ons, but at the end of the day, when you take a look at what you'd have to pay for an Entra suite add-on and what you're getting in return, I think that's a sweet deal. There's some other bundles where I've mixed feelings about, but this one's one where I'm like, yeah, sure. As soon as you get started with the ID governance, there's so much in there, not just the ID, but the GSA stuff. Just makes sense. But yeah, my 2 cents.
And the great thing also is that this applies also to hybrid environments. So it's not just for online users. It's or cloud native.
It's
are called, yeah.
Forged in the cloud, but you can use it anywhere. Absolutely. So if there's one key takeaway, one advice, one call to action that you would give to the listeners, what would that be?
Well, take a look at your tenant or your domain forest, your current environment, and say to yourself, do I really have control of everything that goes on here with accesses? Are people getting the access they need? Can I control when the access should end? Do I have a good design and understanding? Not myself alone as an IAM architect or you inside the organization, but also in the business for how you should control the life cycle of your users. One thing that we haven't discussed is all the things about outbound provisioning and connecting all the apps to Entra, because that's important as well, right? But that we can spend an hour on that as well. But that's as long as you start with the principle of inbound provisioning and controlling the identities and giving process on that topic with outbound it quickly appears. So the takeaway and the biggest tips is see where you can benefit from having those processes automated, how you can do some work to have a good understanding and managing your attributes, and how you can utilize those automations that you can do in lifecycle workflows.
Okay, wonderful. And obviously for those listening, the show notes will have links to different resources that you can use, including some articles that might be very useful. So great. Well, I think, that kind of puts us towards the end of this recording. Jan, thank you so much for joining me and taking time out of your busy schedule. So I really appreciate that for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.